The scorching Texas sun beat down on my weathered skin as I pulled into Joe's auto shop, my ancient pickup truck sputtering its last breaths. "Damn it all to hell," I muttered, slamming the door shut with more force than necessary. This was the last thing I needed today. As I trudged towards the shop's entrance, a sleek sports car pulled in behind me, looking comically out of place in this rundown part of Laredo. The door opened and out stepped a woman who looked equally out of place, all flowing brown hair and designer sunglasses. "Looks like we're both having car trouble," she said, flashing me a smile that was probably meant to be friendly but just irritated me more. I grunted in response, squinting at her through the heat haze. She was younger than me, maybe mid-30s, with a face that belonged on magazine covers rather than in this grease-stained parking lot. "I'm Christina," she continued, undeterred by my lack of enthusiasm. "Christina Diaz." "Diana Henderson," I replied curtly, hoping she'd take the hint and leave me alone. No such luck. As we waited for Joe to finish with another customer, Christina kept chattering away, her voice carrying over the clanking of tools and rumble of engines. "So, what do you do, Diana?" she asked, leaning against the wall next to me. I sighed, resigning myself to small talk. "I'm a fisherwoman. Been working these waters for 30 years now." Her eyes lit up. "Really? That's fascinating. I'm actually a marine biologist. I've been studying the local ecosystem for my latest research project." Despite myself, I felt a flicker of interest. "What kind of research?" As Christina launched into an explanation about algae blooms and their impact on fish populations, I found myself actually listening. She spoke with a passion that was oddly compelling, her hands gesturing animatedly as she described complex biological processes in a way even I could understand. Time seemed to slip away as we talked. Christina asked thoughtful questions about my experiences on the water, and I found myself sharing stories I hadn't told anyone in years. There was something disarming about her enthusiasm, the way her green eyes sparkled when I mentioned a rare species I'd encountered. "You know," she said, leaning in conspiratorially, "I've always wanted to go out on a real fishing boat. Maybe you could show me the ropes sometime?" I hesitated, caught off guard by the invitation. It had been a long time since I'd let anyone new into my life, let alone someone like Christina, but there was something about her. Before I could respond, Joe emerged from the garage, wiping his hands on a greasy rag. "Ladies, I've got good news and bad news. Christina's car just needed a quick fix, but my truck was going to be out of commission for at least a week." As I processed this information, trying to figure out how the hell I was going to get to work, Christina spoke up. "I could give you a ride," she offered. "It's the least I can do after you've been so kind." I raised an eyebrow. "Kind? I've barely said 2 words to you." She laughed, a warm sound that seemed to chase away some of the day's frustrations. "Sometimes listening is the kindest thing you can do. Come on, let me help." As we walked to her car, I found myself stealing glances at Christina. The sun caught her hair, highlighting strands of gold among the brown. She moved with a grace that made me acutely aware of my own weather-beaten appearance. "So," she said as we pulled out of the lot, "where to, Captain Henderson?" I gave her directions to my small house near the docks, all the while wondering what I was getting myself into. Christina Diaz was like a force of nature, sweeping into my carefully ordered life with all the subtlety of a hurricane. As we drove, she kept up a steady stream of conversation, peppering me with questions about local marine life. I found myself warming to her genuine curiosity, sharing knowledge I'd gathered over decades on the water. When we finally pulled up to my house, I felt an unexpected reluctance to say goodbye. Christina must have sensed it because she hesitated before saying, "You know, I volunteer at the animal shelter on weekends. If you ever want to stop by, I'd love to continue our conversation." I nodded, surprising myself by saying, "I might just do that." As I watched her drive away, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in my world. Christina Diaz had blown into my life like a sea breeze, stirring up feelings I thought had long since settled. Little did I know, this chance encounter at Joe's auto shop was just the beginning of a storm that would change everything. The week crawled by, each day a reminder of how much I relied on my beat-up old truck. By Saturday, I was itching to get out of the house, my restlessness driving me to do something I'd never considered before, volunteering at the animal shelter. As I pushed open the shelter's door, the cacophony of barks and meows hit me like a wave. Amidst the chaos, I spotted Christina, her hair tied back in a messy ponytail, kneeling beside a nervous-looking pit bull. She looked up, her face breaking into a wide smile. "Diana, you came." I shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. Figured I might as well make myself useful. Christina introduced me to the staff and showed me around. As we walked, I couldn't help but notice the way her hand occasionally brushed against mine, sending unexpected sparks through my weathered skin. "So," I said, desperate to distract myself from these unfamiliar feelings, "how'd a fancy marine biologist end up volunteering at a place like this?" Christina's smile turned wistful. "I've always loved animals, and sometimes it's nice to help creatures that can't repay you, you know?" There was something in her tone that hinted at a deeper story, but before I could ask, we were interrupted by a staff member. "Christina, your father's on the phone, says it's urgent." A shadow passed over Christina's face, so quickly I almost missed it. "I'll be right back," she said, squeezing my arm gently before hurrying off. Left alone, I busied myself with the animals, finding unexpected comfort in their simple needs and uncomplicated affection. When Christina returned, her earlier buoyancy seemed diminished. "Everything okay?" I asked, surprising myself with my concern. She nodded, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Just family stuff, nothing to worry about." We spent the rest of the afternoon working side by side, our conversations flowing more easily with each passing hour. As the shelter prepared to close, Christina turned to me, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Fancy a walk on the beach? I know a great spot to watch the sunset." Against my better judgment, I agreed. As we strolled along the shoreline, the setting sun painting the sky in vibrant oranges and pinks, Christina's hand found mine. I tensed for a moment, then slowly relaxed, allowing our fingers to intertwine. "Diana," she said softly, "there's something I need to tell you." My heart raced, equal parts anticipation and fear. But before she could continue, a voice called out from behind us. "Christina, there you are." We turned to see a well-dressed man striding towards us, his face a mask of barely contained anger. Christina dropped my hand as if it had burned her. "Dad," she said, her voice tight, "what are you doing here?" The man, Mr. Diaz I assumed, glared at me before turning to his daughter. "We've been trying to reach you all day. The press conference is tomorrow, and we need to go over your statement." Christina's face paled. "I told you I'm not doing it. I can't support this project." Mr. Diaz's eyes narrowed. "This isn't up for discussion. You have a responsibility to this family, to our legacy." As they argued, pieces started falling into place. The Diaz name, the controversial development plans I'd heard whispers about down at the docks. Christina wasn't just some rich girl playing at being a scientist. She was the heiress to an empire that threatened to destroy the very ecosystem she studied. "I'm sorry," Christina said, turning to me with pleading eyes. "I have to go. I'll explain everything, I promise." I watched her leave with her father, feeling like I'd been caught in a riptide, pulled into deeper waters than I'd ever intended to navigate. The next few days were a blur of conflicting emotions. I threw myself into work, trying to ignore the way my heart leapt every time my phone buzzed with a text from Christina. She kept reaching out, asking to meet, to explain, but I held back, unsure of where I fit in her world of wealth and influence. It wasn't until I saw her on the local news, standing stiffly beside her father as he announced plans for a massive harbor renovation, that I realized how much I missed her. The Christina on screen was a shadow of the vibrant woman I'd come to know, her eyes dull and her smile forced. That night, as I sat on my porch watching the waves crash against the shore, my phone buzzed once more. Another text from Christina. "I'm at the lighthouse, please come, I need you." I stared at the message for a long moment, weighing my options. Then, with a sigh, I grabbed my keys and headed out. Whatever storm was brewing between us, I knew I couldn't leave her to weather it alone. The old lighthouse stood sentinel over the churning sea, its beam cutting through the gathering darkness. As I approached, I saw Christina's silhouette at the base, her hair whipping in the wind. She turned as I neared, her face a mix of relief and apprehension. "Diana," she breathed, taking a step towards me. "I wasn't sure you'd come." Neither was I admitted, my voice gruff with emotion. We stood in silence for a moment, the roar of the waves filling the space between us. Then, as if driven by some unseen force, we moved together. Our lips met in a kiss that tasted of salt and secrets, of longing and fear. When we finally broke apart, breathless and trembling, I knew that whatever came next, there was no going back. The tide had turned, and Christina and I were caught in its inexorable pull. The morning after our lighthouse encounter, I woke to the sound of angry voices outside my window. Peering out, I saw a group of local fishermen gathered on the street, their faces twisted with fury as they waved protest signs. "No to Diaz development," one sign read. "Save our harbor," proclaimed another. My stomach churned as I remembered Christina's family name plastered across the news. The Diaz Harbor renovation project, the very thing that had brought such anguish to Christina's eyes. As I dressed hurriedly, my phone buzzed with a text from her. "Can we talk? It's important." I agreed to meet her at a small cafe on the outskirts of town, away from prying eyes and angry protesters. When I arrived, Christina was already there, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "I'm so sorry," she blurted out as soon as I sat down. "I should have told you everything from the beginning." I listened as she poured out the whole story, her family's plans to revitalize the harbor, the environmental impact studies she'd tried to present, her father's dismissal of her concerns. "I've been fighting this from the inside," she said, her green eyes pleading for understanding. "But it's like screaming into the void. They don't listen, they don't care." I reached across the table, taking her hand in mine. "So, what are you going to do?" Christina's fingers tightened around mine. "I'm going public. I'm going to oppose the project openly, using my research to show the damage it'll cause." My heart swelled with pride, even as fear gripped me. "Your family won't like that." "No," she agreed, a sad smile playing on her lips. "They won't, but I have to do what's right." We spent the next few hours strategizing, poring over Christina's research, and planning her public statement. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the cafe table, Christina looked up at me with a vulnerability that made my breath catch. "Will you stand with me?" she asked softly. "When I go public?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. Christina leaned across the table, her lips meeting mine in a kiss that tasted of coffee and courage. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Christina worked tirelessly, preparing her statement and gathering supporters. I found myself caught between worlds, supporting Christina while trying to maintain my standing in the fishing community. The night before Christina's press conference, we took my newly repaired truck out to the lighthouse. As we sat on the rocky shore, the beam of light sweeping over us, Christina nestled into my side. "Are you scared?" I asked, running my fingers through her soft hair. She nodded against my shoulder. "Terrified, but also free." I turned to face her, cupping her face in my calloused hands. "You're the bravest person I know, Christina Diaz." Our kiss that night was deep and desperate, filled with all the words we couldn't say. As we made love under the stars, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore seemed to echo the beating of our hearts. The morning of the press conference dawned bright and clear. I stood at the back of the crowd, my heart in my throat as Christina took the podium. She looked beautiful and fierce, her voice strong as she laid out the environmental dangers of the harbor project. The reaction was immediate and intense. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed, and in the front row, I could see Mr. Diaz's face turning an alarming shade of purple. As Christina fielded questions with grace and authority, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Turning, I found myself face to face with Jack, one of the oldest and most respected fishermen in Laredo. "This true, Diana?" he asked, his weathered face creased with concern. "You supporting this Diaz girl?" I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of countless eyes on me. "I'm supporting the truth, Jack, and protecting our waters." Jack's eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought he might argue, but then he nodded slowly. "Always knew you had more sense than most, Henderson. Hope you know what you're doing." As he walked away, I felt a mixture of relief and unease. I'd chosen my side, for better or worse. The press conference ended in chaos, with Christina being whisked away by her team of lawyers and PR people. It wasn't until late that night that she showed up at my door, her eyes red-rimmed but determined. It's done, she said, collapsing into my arms. For better or worse, it's done. I held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. What happens now? Christina pulled back, her gaze meeting mine. Now we fight. As we lay in bed that night, Christina's head resting on my chest, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the edge of a precipice. The battle lines had been drawn, and we'd placed ourselves squarely in the crosshairs. But as I listened to Christina's steady breathing, felt the warmth of her body against mine, I knew that whatever storms were coming, we'd weather them together. In the short time we'd known each other, Christina had become my anchor, my safe harbor in the tempest of life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fights. But for now, in the quiet of the night, we had each other, and somehow that felt like enough. The morning after Christina's press conference, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing incessantly. Groggily, I reached for it, only to be jolted awake by the flood of notifications. Missed calls, text messages, and news alerts all screamed for attention. Shit, I muttered, scrolling through the chaos. The local news had picked up Christina's story, and it was spreading like wildfire. Her face was plastered across every screen, her words dissected and debated by talking heads and internet commentators alike. Beside me, Christina stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice still thick with sleep. I showed her the phone, watching as realization dawned on her face. "Oh God," she whispered, sitting up abruptly. "It's really happening, isn't it?" We spent the next hour huddled over my ancient laptop, tracking the story's progress. Christina's phone rang non-stop, but she ignored it, her face growing paler with each missed call. "They're going to crucify me," she said softly, staring at a particularly vicious comment thread. "My family, the media, everyone." I wrapped an arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "Hey, look at me," I said, waiting until her green eyes met mine. "You did the right thing. We'll get through this together." She nodded, but I could see the doubt lingering in her gaze. As we prepared to face the day, I couldn't shake the feeling that our little bubble of peace was about to burst. We decided to head to the docks, hoping the familiar sights and sounds would provide some comfort. But as soon as we stepped out of my truck, it became clear that there would be no escaping the fallout. Whispers followed us as we walked, and I could feel the weight of accusing stares. Old friends turned away as we approached, and even the seagulls seemed to cry out in judgment. "Diana!" a voice called out. I turned to see Mike, a fellow fisherman I'd known for years, striding towards us. His face was a mask of betrayal and anger. "How could you side with them, after everything the Diaz family's done?" I felt Christina tense beside me, but I stood my ground. "It's not about sides, Mike. It's about doing what's right for our waters, our livelihoods." Mike's eyes narrowed. "Looks to me like you've chosen your side pretty clearly," he spat, glaring at Christina. "Hope she's worth it." As he stormed off, I felt a deep ache in my chest. These were my people, my community, and now, because of my choice to stand with Christina, I was becoming an outsider. We retreated to my boat, seeking refuge from the hostile stares. As we sat in the cabin, the gentle rocking of the waves a stark contrast to the turmoil in our hearts, Christina's phone buzzed yet again. This time, she answered. I watched as the color drained from her face, her knuckles turning white as she gripped the phone. "Yes, Father," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I understand." "No, I can't do that. I won't." When she hung up, her eyes were filled with unshed tears. "They're cutting me off," she said, her voice breaking. "Financially, emotionally, everything. Unless I retract my statement and support the project." I pulled her into my arms, feeling her body shake with silent sobs. "I'm so sorry," I murmured, stroking her hair. "What can I do?" Christina pulled back, wiping her eyes. Just hold me, please." We stayed like that for a long time, the sounds of the harbor fading into the background as we clung to each other. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the water, Christina stirred. "I should go," she said softly. "I need to figure out what I'm going to do next." I nodded, trying to ignore the pang in my chest at the thought of her leaving. "You could stay here," I offered, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "With me, I mean. If you want." Christina's eyes widened in surprise, then softened with emotion. She leaned in, pressing her lips to mine in a kiss that tasted of salt and hope. That night, as we lay tangled together in my small bed, the sounds of the sea drifting through the open window, I felt a shift in the air between us. This wasn't just about attraction or shared ideals anymore. This was something deeper, something that both thrilled and terrified me. As Christina's breathing evened out in sleep, her head tucked under my chin, I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. I'd spent years building walls around my heart, content in my solitude. But now, with this brilliant, brave woman in my arms, those walls were crumbling. The next morning brought new challenges. Christina's face was splashed across the front page of the local paper, the headline screaming, "Diaz heiress betrays family legacy." As we sat at my small kitchen table, poring over the article, a rock came crashing through the window. Glass shattered around us as we ducked for cover. Heart pounding, I rushed to the window, just in time to see a group of young men running away, their angry shouts fading into the distance. "Are you okay?" I asked Christina, checking her for cuts. She nodded, her face pale but determined. "I'm fine. But Diana, I'm so sorry. I never meant to bring this chaos into your life." I cupped her face in my hands, forcing her to meet my gaze. "Listen to me. We're in this together, okay? No matter what happens." As we cleaned up the broken glass, fielding calls from concerned friends and dodging requests for interviews, I couldn't help but wonder what the future held. We were caught in a storm of controversy, our lives turned upside down by forces beyond our control. But as I watched Christina, her jaw set with determination as she swept up the shards of glass, I felt a surge of pride and affection. Whatever came next, we would face it side by side. The battle for Laredo's future was just beginning, and we were at the heart of it all. But in that moment, with Christina by my side, I felt ready to take on the world. The days following the rock-throwing incident blurred together in a whirlwind of media frenzy and community backlash. Christina threw herself into her work, spending long hours hunched over my kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of scientific papers and environmental reports. I did my best to shield her from the worst of it, intercepting angry phone calls and turning away reporters who camped out on my front porch. But I couldn't protect her from everything, especially not the pain of her family's rejection. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Christina's phone buzzed with a news alert. She tensed beside me as she read the headline aloud. "Diaz heiress to make public statement against family's harbor project." "It's tomorrow," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm going to formally oppose the project at the city council meeting." I squeezed her hand, feeling the slight tremor that ran through her. "Are you sure about this?" Christina nodded, her green eyes blazing with determination. "I have to do this, Diana. For the ecosystem, for the community, for us." That night, as we lay in bed, the weight of tomorrow's confrontation hung heavy in the air. Christina tossed and turned, unable to find peace. In the dim light of the moon filtering through the curtains, I saw a vulnerability in her that made my heart ache. "Talk to me," I murmured, pulling her close. She buried her face in my neck, her words muffled against my skin. "What if I'm not strong enough? What if I falter when I see my father's face?" I stroked her hair, searching for the right words. "You're the strongest person I know, Christina, but even if you stumble, I'll be right there to catch you." She lifted her head, her eyes searching mine. Without a word, she leaned in, her lips meeting mine in a kiss that spoke volumes. As our bodies intertwined, we lost ourselves in each other, finding solace and strength in our connection. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside us. As we dressed for the council meeting, I couldn't help but marvel at the change in Christina. Gone was the carefree marine biologist I'd met at the auto shop. In her place stood a woman of fierce determination, ready to take on the world. The city hall was packed when we arrived, a sea of familiar faces turned hostile. I felt the weight of their stares as we made our way to the front, my hand on the small of Christina's back, guiding and supporting her. As Christina took her place at the podium, I saw her father enter from a side door, his face a mask of cold fury. For a moment Christina faltered, her eyes meeting his. But then she straightened her shoulders, took a deep breath, and began to speak. Her voice, clear and strong, filled the room as she laid out the environmental impact of the harbor project. She spoke of endangered species, of delicate ecosystems disrupted, of the long-term consequences that would far outweigh any short-term economic gains. As she concluded her statement, the room erupted into chaos. Shouts and arguments broke out, drowning out the council members' attempts to restore order. Through it all, Christina stood tall, her gaze never wavering from her father's face. In the midst of the uproar, I felt a tap on my shoulder. Turning, I found myself face to face with Jack, the old fisherman who had confronted me after the press conference. "You were right, Henderson," he said gruffly. "That girl's got guts. And brains to boot. Maybe it's time we old-timers started listening to the young folks." His words sent a surge of hope through me. If Jack, one of the most respected voices in our community, was coming around, maybe others would follow. As we left the council chambers, Christina was immediately swarmed by reporters. I watched from a distance, marveling at her poise as she fielded questions with grace and authority. When she finally broke free, she made a beeline for me, her face flushed with adrenaline. "Let's get out of here," she said, grabbing my hand. We drove in silence, the weight of the day's events settling over us. Without discussion, I steered us towards the harbor, knowing instinctively that Christina needed the calming presence of the sea. As we walked along the moonlit shore, hands intertwined, Christina finally spoke. "I did it," she said softly, as if she couldn't quite believe it herself. I stopped, turning to face her. "You were amazing," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of you." Christina's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "I couldn't have done it without you, Diana. You've been my rock through all of this." I cupped her face in my hands, marveling at the strength and beauty of this woman who had turned my world upside down. "We're in this together, remember?" As our lips met, the crash of waves against the shore seemed to echo the tumultuous beating of my heart. In that moment, with Christina in my arms and the vast ocean stretching out before us, I felt a sense of rightness, of belonging, that I'd never experienced before. Later that night, as we lay tangled together in my small bed, Christina's head resting on my chest, she whispered, "What happens now?" I stroked her hair, pondering the question. The battle was far from over. There would be more fights, more challenges to face. But as I held Christina close, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat against mine, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together. "Now," I said softly, "we keep fighting. For the harbor, for our community, for us." Christina lifted her head, her eyes meeting mine in the darkness. "Us," she repeated, a smile in her voice. I like the sound of that. As we drifted off to sleep, the sound of the waves a constant backdrop to our quiet breaths, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead might be rough, but with Christina by my side, I was ready to navigate whatever storms might come our way. The weeks following Christina's public stand against her family's project were a whirlwind of activity. We found ourselves at the center of a growing movement, our days filled with community meetings, strategy sessions, and impromptu rallies on the beach. Christina threw herself into the fight with a fervor that both inspired and worried me. I'd catch her working late into the night, her face illuminated by the glow of her laptop screen, dark circles forming under her eyes. "You need to rest," I'd say, gently closing the computer lid. She'd look up at me, her green eyes blazing with determination. "I can't, Diana. There's too much at stake." I understood her drive, but I couldn't shake the nagging fear that she was pushing herself too hard. The stress was taking its toll, and I could see the cracks beginning to form in her usually unshakable resolve. One evening, as we sat on my porch watching the sunset, Christina's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, her face paling. "It's my father," she whispered. I squeezed her hand. "You don't have to answer." She shook her head, taking a deep breath before accepting the call. I could hear the muffled sound of her father's voice, growing increasingly loud and angry. Christina's responses were short, her voice strained. Finally, she ended the call, her hand shaking as she set the phone down. "He's cutting me off completely," she said, her voice barely audible. "No more access to family funds, no more support, he says. He says I'm no longer a Diaz." I pulled her into my arms, feeling her body tremble as she finally allowed herself to break down. We sat there for a long time, the sound of her quiet sobs mixing with the distant crash of waves. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Christina lifted her head, her eyes red-rimmed but determined. "I won't back down," she said fiercely. "I can't." I cupped her face in my hands, my heart swelling with pride and love for this incredible woman. "I know," I said softly, "and I'll be right here beside you, every step of the way." Our lips met in a kiss that tasted of salt and shared strength. That night, we made love with a desperate intensity, as if we could ward off the world's challenges through the sheer force of our connection. The next morning, we woke to news that sent shockwaves through our small community. The animal shelter where we'd first reconnected was facing closure, a casualty of budget cuts linked to the harbor development plans. "We can't let this happen," Christina said, her jaw set with determination. "That shelter is too important to the community." I nodded, already formulating a plan. "We'll rally the troops. This might be just what we need to show people the real cost of this development." Over the next few days, we threw ourselves into organizing a fundraiser for the shelter. It was a welcome distraction from the larger battle, a chance to focus on something immediate and tangible. As word spread, I was surprised by the outpouring of support. Even some of the fishermen who had been wary of our fight against the harbor project stepped up to help. It seemed the shelter held a special place in many hearts. The night of the fundraiser arrived, the shelter transformed with twinkling lights and the sound of laughter. As I watched Christina work the room, charming donors and sharing stories of the animals we'd helped, I felt a surge of emotion. This was the woman I'd fallen in love with, passionate, determined, and endlessly compassionate. Despite everything she'd lost, she was still fighting, still working to make our community better. As the evening wound down, Christina found me by the punch bowl. "We did it," she said, her eyes shining with excitement. "We raised enough to keep the shelter open for another year." I pulled her close, not caring who might see. "You did it," I corrected her. "This was all you, Christina." She shook her head, her arms wrapping around my waist. "No, we did it. I couldn't have done any of this without you, Diana." As we swayed together, the sounds of the party fading into the background, I felt a shift in the air between us. This wasn't just about the shelter, or even the larger fight against the harbor project. This was about us, about the life we were building together in the face of all odds. Later that night, as we walked along the moonlit beach hand in hand, Christina stopped suddenly. "Move in with me," she blurted out. I blinked, caught off guard. "What?" She turned to face me, her eyes serious in the silvery light. "I know it's fast, and I know we're in the middle of this crazy fight, but I love you, Diana. I want to wake up next to you every morning, face whatever comes our way together." My heart raced, a mix of excitement and fear coursing through me. I'd spent so long on my own, guarding my heart. But looking at Christina, I realized I'd already given it to her, piece by piece, day by day. "Yes," I said, my voice rough with emotion. "Yes, I'll move in with you." Her smile was radiant as she pulled me close, our lips meeting in a kiss that felt like a promise, like a new beginning. As we made our way back to my small house, soon to be our home, I couldn't help but marvel at the twists and turns that had brought us to this point. From a chance meeting at an auto shop to standing united against a multi-million-dollar development project, our journey had been anything but ordinary. But as I looked at Christina, her hand warm in mine and her eyes full of love and determination, I knew there was nowhere else I'd rather be. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever storms we might face, we would weather them together. The fight for Laredo's future was far from over, but in that moment, with the woman I loved by my side and the sound of the sea in our ears, I felt ready for anything. Our love had become a beacon of hope, not just for us, but for our entire community. And that, I realized, was worth fighting for. The months following our decision to move in together were a whirlwind of activity. Between organizing our shared living space and continuing our fight against the harbor development, Christina and I barely had a moment to breathe. But even in the chaos, I found myself reveling in the simple joys of domestic life with her. One morning, as we sat at our small kitchen table, sharing coffee and the local newspaper, Christina's eyes widened as she read the front page headline. "Diana, look at this," she said, pushing the paper towards me. The headline read, "Environmental groups join forces with local fishermen to oppose Diaz Harbor project." As I scanned the article, I felt a surge of hope. Our grassroots movement was gaining traction, attracting attention from larger organizations with the resources to challenge the development on a larger scale. Christina's phone buzzed with a text. "It's from my contact at the Environmental Defense Fund," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "They want to meet with us today." The meeting was held in a small conference room at the local library. As Christina and I walked in hand, I was struck by the diverse group gathered around the table. Environmental lawyers sat next to grizzled fishermen, while marine biologists compared notes with local business owners. As the meeting progressed, it became clear that a compromise was emerging. The environmental groups proposed an alternative development plan that would preserve critical habitats while still allowing for economic growth. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. "This could work," Christina murmured to me, her eyes shining with cautious optimism. As we left the library, the warm Texas sun beating down on us, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in months, it felt like we were making real progress. But our moment of hope was short-lived. As we approached my truck, we saw a familiar figure leaning against it. Mr. Diaz, Christina's father, stood there with his arms crossed, his face a mask of barely contained fury. "Christina," he said, his voice cold. "We need to talk." I felt Christina tense beside me, but she stood her ground. "Anything you have to say to me, you can say in front of Diana," she replied, her chin lifted in defiance. Mr. Diaz's eyes flicked to me, a sneer curling his lip. "Very well, I'm here to give you one last chance. Drop this foolish crusade, come back to the family, and all will be forgiven." Christina shook her head. "I can't do that, Father. You know I can't." "Then you leave me no choice," he spat. "You're cut off, completely. No more access to family resources, no more trust fund, nothing." I watched as the color drained from Christina's face. Despite her brave front, I knew how much this hurt her. I stepped forward, placing myself between Christina and her father. "She doesn't need your money," I said, my voice low and steady. "She has something far more valuable: integrity and love." Mr. Diaz's face contorted with rage. For a moment, I thought he might strike me, but instead, he turned on his heel and stormed off, leaving us standing in stunned silence. As soon as he was out of sight, Christina's composure crumbled. I pulled her into my arms, feeling her body shake with silent sobs. "It's okay," I murmured, stroking her hair. "We'll figure this out, together." That night, as we lay in bed, Christina turned to me, her eyes red-rimmed but determined. "I meant what I said, Diana. I won't back down, not even for my family." I pulled her close, marveling at her strength. "I know, and I'll be right here beside you, every step of the way." The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, rallies, and late-night strategy sessions. We threw ourselves into the fight, working tirelessly to promote the compromise plan. Slowly but surely, we began to see a shift in public opinion. One evening, as we walked along the beach, hand in hand, Christina stopped suddenly. "Look," she said, pointing towards the water. A pod of dolphins was playing in the waves, their sleek bodies glistening in the setting sun. It was a sight we hadn't seen in months, driven away by the increased boat traffic from the preliminary development work. "They're back," Christina whispered, her voice filled with wonder. As we stood there, watching the dolphins frolic, I felt a surge of renewed determination. This was what we were fighting for, not just for ourselves, but for the delicate ecosystem that called these waters home. The next day brought unexpected news. The city council had called an emergency meeting to discuss the harbor project. As Christina and I took our seats in the packed chamber, the tension in the air was palpable. The mayor cleared his throat, calling the meeting to order. "In light of recent developments and community feedback," he began, "we've decided to put the Diaz Harbor project to a public vote." The room erupted in a mix of cheers and angry shouts. Christina gripped my hand tightly, her eyes wide with disbelief. This was it, our chance to let the people decide. As we left the council chambers, we were immediately swarmed by reporters. Christina handled them with grace, articulating our position clearly and passionately. I stood by her side, marveling at her poise and eloquence. When we finally broke free from the media frenzy, Christina turned to me, her face flushed with excitement. "We did it, Diana. We actually did it." I pulled her close, not caring who might see. "No, you did it. You never gave up, even when it cost you everything." She shook her head, her arms wrapping around my waist. Not everything. I still have you. As we kissed, the flash of cameras going off around us, I realized that this moment marked a turning point. Win or lose, we had already achieved something remarkable. We had brought a community together, sparked a conversation about environmental responsibility, and in the process, found a love deeper and stronger than either of us had ever known. That night, as we celebrated with our allies at the local bar, I watched Christina work the room, her energy infectious as she rallied support for the upcoming vote. In that moment, I saw not just the woman I loved, but a leader who had found her calling. As the night wore on and the crowd thinned, Christina made her way back to me. "Ready to go home?" she asked, her eyes bright with exhaustion and excitement. I nodded, taking her hand. As we walked out into the cool night air, the stars twinkling overhead, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Whatever the outcome of the vote, whatever challenges lay ahead, I knew we would face them together. Our fight for Laredo's future had brought us together, tested us, and ultimately made us stronger. And as we made our way home hand in hand, I realized that in many ways, we had already won. The weeks leading up to the public vote were a blur of activity. Christina and I threw ourselves into the campaign, spending every waking moment rallying support, distributing flyers, and speaking at community events. Our little house became campaign headquarters, with volunteers coming and going at all hours. Despite the chaos, I found myself relishing every moment. Watching Christina in her element, passionate and determined, only made me fall more deeply in love with her. Even on the toughest days, when we faced setbacks or encountered hostile opposition, we found strength in each other. The night before the vote, we took a rare moment for ourselves, walking hand in hand along the moonlit beach. The sound of waves lapping at the shore soothed our frayed nerves. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Christina said softly, "I want you to know that I wouldn't change a thing. This fight brought me to you, and that's worth everything." I pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair. "We've already won, in all the ways that matter," I replied, my voice thick with emotion. As dawn broke on voting day, we were up early, fueled by nervous energy and too much coffee. We made our way to the polling station, joining the line of citizens eager to have their say in Laredo's future. The day crawled by at an agonizing pace. Christina and I made last-minute calls, checked in with volunteers, and tried not to watch the clock. As evening approached and the polls closed, we gathered with our supporters at the local community center to await the results. The room buzzed with nervous energy as we huddled around a small TV, watching as the votes were tallied. Christina gripped my hand tightly, her face a mask of tense concentration. As the final numbers came in, the room fell silent. For a moment, it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Then, the announcer's voice rang out, clear and definitive. "The citizens of Laredo have voted to reject the Diaz Harbor project and adopt the alternative eco-friendly development plan." The room erupted in cheers. Christina turned to me, her eyes shining with tears of joy and disbelief. Without a word, she pulled me into a kiss that tasted of victory and promise. As we celebrated late into the night, surrounded by friends and supporters, I marveled at how far we'd come. From a chance meeting at an auto shop to leading a movement that changed the course of our town's future, our journey had been nothing short of extraordinary. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity as plans for the new eco-friendly development began to take shape. Christina was at the forefront, working tirelessly with environmental groups and city planners to ensure that every detail aligned with our vision for a sustainable future. One sunny afternoon, as we stood on the pier overlooking the harbor, Christina turned to me with a mischievous glint in her eye. "You know," she said, "we never did get around to that fishing lesson you promised me." I laughed, remembering our first conversation at the auto shop. "Well, Dr. Diaz, I think it's about time I made good on that offer." We spent the rest of the day out on my old fishing boat, Christina's laughter ringing out across the water as she struggled to bait her hook. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, she finally managed to reel in a small perch. "I did it," she exclaimed, holding up her catch with pride. I couldn't help but grin at her enthusiasm. "Not bad for a city girl," I teased. As we made our way back to shore, Christina grew quiet, a thoughtful expression on her face. "What's on your mind?" I asked, cutting the engine as we approached the dock. She turned to me, her eyes serious. "I've been thinking, what if we combined our passions? A marine wildlife rescue center right here in Laredo. We could educate people about conservation, rehabilitate injured animals, maybe even lead eco-tours." I felt a surge of excitement at the idea. "Christina, that's brilliant. But it would be a lot of work, starting from scratch." She grinned, the familiar spark of determination lighting up her face. "When has that ever stopped us?" Over the next few months, our dream began to take shape. We poured ourselves into planning, securing funding, and renovating an old boathouse into our new center. It was exhausting work, but every time I saw Christina's face light up as she described our plans to potential donors or volunteers, I knew we were on the right path. The day we officially opened the Laredo Marine Wildlife Rescue Center was one I'll never forget. As I watched Christina cut the ribbon, surrounded by cheering supporters and curious locals, I felt a sense of pride and love so intense it nearly overwhelmed me. That evening, as we stood on the center's observation deck, watching the sun set over the water, Christina turned to me with tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly, "for believing in me, for standing by me through everything. I couldn't have done any of this without you." I pulled her close, marveling at how perfectly she fit in my arms. "We did this together," I replied, "and there's no one else I'd rather have by my side." As we shared a tender kiss, the sound of waves lapping at the shore below us, I realized that our journey was far from over. There would be new challenges to face, new battles to fight. But with Christina by my side, I was ready for anything. Our love story had become intertwined with the story of Laredo itself, a tale of transformation, of finding strength in unexpected places, and of the power of two people to make a difference. As we made our way home that night, hand in hand under a sky full of stars, I knew that whatever the future held, we would face it together. Our love, like the tides, would ebb and flow, but it would always be there, constant and true, guiding us home,